Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
It started with a sharp pain on my right side, just under the rib cage, a kind of stabbing that made me stop mid-step in the hallway between the kitchen and the bathroom. I thought maybe it was gas or something stupid like that, so I lay down with a heating pad and tried to breathe through it. But an hour later, I was doubled over, sweating, shaking, and trying not to throw up on the shag rug I'd meant to replace for 3 years. I drove myself to the ER like an idiot, clutching the wheel with one hand and pressing the other against my stomach like that could stop whatever was happening inside me. They said it was a ruptured appendix, caught late, and that I was lucky I didn't wait another hour. Emergency surgery, 2 nights in the hospital, and a lovely assortment of complications afterward, because why not? My body reacted poorly to the anesthesia, my incision got infected, and I couldn't keep down anything but applesauce for almost 5 days. I ended up staying in bed for nearly 4 weeks, and the only reason I didn't lose my job at the school was because of some accumulated sick days and a very kind department chair who stepped in without asking questions. But while I was home recovering, the bills started rolling in like a slow-motion avalanche. I opened each envelope with shaking hands: surgery, overnight stays, medications, follow-up visits, specialists I'd never met, tests I barely remembered having done. It was well over $20,000, or maybe 30. Wait, I think I'm mixing it up with the year Nate bought that $60,000 truck. No, 20,000. Yeah, 20. Still, too much for me to cover with my dwindling savings and half-pay leave. I didn't want to ask anyone for help. I've always prided myself on being the one who gets through it alone. I was the one who took care of Mom when she slipped a disc and couldn't walk for a week, the one who helped Nate's wife with her twins when they were teething monsters and Nate suddenly had to work late every night. I've always been there. Quiet, solid, dependable, and mostly alone. But on one particular night, about 3 weeks after the surgery, I found myself crying in the dark, more from frustration than pain. I had the heating pad against my stomach again, even though I wasn't sure it did anything. I was scared, if I'm honest. Scared of going under. I swallowed my pride and called Mom. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounded surprised to hear my voice, like maybe she forgot I was in recovery. I told her what happened, told her about the bills, about missing work, about how I might have to dip into my 401k just to pay the deductible. She was quiet for a beat, then said, "Oh, honey, I wish I could help." Her voice was gentle, like she was breaking some bad news that wasn't her fault, like the bank had frozen her assets or her house had burned down. But none of that was true. She had a fully paid-off condo, a comfortable retirement from her nursing job, and even a little side money she made babysitting for her church friends now and then. It wasn't that she couldn't help. It was that she didn't want to. I didn't cry while she was on the phone. I just said, "Okay, I understand," and hung up before I started shaking. But that night, alone in bed, I sobbed until my entire body ached again. I cried harder than I did the day my husband packed his bags and left me for a yoga instructor with arms like steel and the emotional depth of a toaster. This felt worse. That was betrayal from a man who made promises. This was betrayal from the woman who raised me. I tried to make excuses for her, the way I always did. Maybe she was strapped that month. Maybe she didn't understand how bad it really was. Maybe she was going through something herself and just couldn't show up for me. I replayed our conversation again and again in my head, trying to find some hidden kindness in her tone, some hint of regret I missed. But all I could hear was the word wish, soft and useless as tissue paper. The next morning, I opened my phone to check the time because I still wasn't sleeping more than a few hours a night, and that's when I saw it. A notification on Facebook. Mom had tagged herself in a photo. It was a beach. A bright, blinding Mexican beach with teal water and lounge chairs. My mother was in the photo, wearing a floppy sun hat and holding a margarita bigger than her head, with one arm around Nate and the other holding up a peace sign. The caption read, "Celebrating my baby boy's big new chapter. So proud of Nate and Kayla for buying their first house." Love you, family. I didn't know what hit harder, the tequila glass, the fact that she flew to Mexico while I was rationing ibuprofen, or that she called my brother's house a new chapter while I was stuck in the same cramped rental, drowning in debt and dried soup packets. I stared at that photo for a full minute before the pain in my stomach reminded me I wasn't done healing yet. And somewhere in the haze of nausea and fury, I knew something had shifted. Something in me cracked, quietly but permanently. I turned off my phone and went back to bed. But I didn't cry this time, not even a little. I just stared at the ceiling and counted the cracks in the plaster, each one like a little reminder. I was on my own. And maybe I always had been. The coughing wouldn't stop, no matter how I sat, no matter what I drank. And no matter how many times I tried the old trick of breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth like some kind of stubborn yoga student who didn't want to admit she was drowning from the inside out. The pneumonia hit a week after I started to feel like I might finally be turning a corner, and I remember thinking, in that deliriously tired way you think when your body's failing you, of course this would happen now. I'd just gotten to the point where I could walk to the kitchen without my legs buckling, but my lungs had other plans. I coughed until my sides cramped up and the scar on my stomach screamed, and even then I still got up the next morning to check my email because bills don't wait and neither does the world. I was exhausted. Not just physically, but in my soul, the way people get when they've carried too much for too long. I hadn't spoken to Mom since that short phone call where she told me she wished she could help, and to be honest, part of me didn't even want to anymore. There was a hollowness in her voice that night, like she was already halfway somewhere else, and it turns out I was right, because she was. Somewhere else. That Saturday morning, I opened Facebook on reflex, just looking for a distraction, something to pull me out of the fog, and I saw it immediately. A new photo, bright and cheerful, pinned to the top of her profile. She was boarding a plane. First class. Holding a mimosa in one hand and giving the flight attendant that fake nice smile she always used when she wanted an extra snack box. The caption was all sunshine and exclamation points, off to celebrate with my babies. Family is everything. I blinked at the words like maybe I was hallucinating, like maybe the codeine-laced cough syrup was giving me some kind of twisted fever dream. But no, there were more posts, one after another, like a trail of cheerful breadcrumbs leading straight into the mouth of hell. Videos of palm trees swaying, a beachside villa with a wraparound balcony, Nate's smug face giving a tour of our dream home, and my mother sitting on a wicker chaise lounge with a margarita in one hand and her sunglasses tilted just so. She wore white. To his housewarming. A long, breezy sundress that looked like it cost more than my entire grocery budget for the month, and a pair of sandals I'd seen her try on the year before, the ones she said were a bit extravagant for someone her age. I guess she changed her mind. Funny how that happens when you're sipping cocktails in Cancun instead of lying in bed trying to keep your lungs from collapsing. Every story felt like a punch in the stomach. There was one of her slow dancing with Nate under fairy lights while Kayla recorded it like it was some sacred moment. There was another where she toasted to new beginnings and said she was proud of the man her son had become. And then came the post that broke me in a way I didn't see coming. It was a close-up of Nate and Kayla on the front steps of their brand-new, sprawling, beige-on-beige house. My mother was standing beside them, her hand on Nate's shoulder, her smile practically breaking her face. The caption read, "So proud of my son and his beautiful new home. You earned this." I read it twice. 3 times. That word earned scraped against me like sandpaper. She never once said I earned anything. Not when I finished college while working 2 jobs, not when I paid off my student loans without help, not when I survived a divorce without falling apart. She never told me she was proud, not once in the 41 years I've been breathing. And then, the final gut punch, I found out she helped with the down payment. Kayla let it slip in the comments, because of course she did. Someone asked how they managed to snag such a competitive property in that market, and Kayla wrote, "Honestly, we couldn't have done it without Mom. She was a godsend with the down payment." There it was, plain as day. Mom had cut a check, probably a big one, to help Nate and Kayla buy their suburban castle, while I was over here pulling lint from my wallet and hoping the antibiotics weren't going to bankrupt me completely. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call her and say everything I'd been swallowing since I was old enough to notice that Nate always got the bigger presents, the better birthday parties, the benefit of every doubt. I wanted to shout into the phone until she heard just how broken I felt. But instead, I did something quieter and maybe even pettier. I commented on the photo. Just 2 words. Must be nice. It sat there for 10 minutes, long enough for Kayla to see it and click the little like button with the kind of passive-aggressive cheer only she could muster. Then it vanished. Deleted. No explanation. No reply. No call. Just erased like it never happened, like I never happened. I stared at my screen, and something in my chest went cold. Not angry. Not sad. Just cold. Like frost spreading across a window pane, sharp and beautiful and final. That's when I realized she didn't just forget me. She erased me. And part of me started to wonder if I should return the favor. There's something strange about silence, how loud it can get when it stretches out long enough to settle into your bones and starts whispering things you try not to believe. It had been 3 full weeks since I left that comment on Mom's photo, since she deleted it without a word, and since I decided to do what I should have done years ago, stop begging to be seen. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't like any more smiling photos of Cancun sunsets or Nate's toddlers with their $1,000,000 grins and curated messes. I didn't respond when she posted that cryptic little meme about family being complicated but still worth it, the kind of thing boomers throw out like fishing lines when they want you to bite but don't want to say anything with a spine. I stayed silent, and the silence began to change shape. It stopped being about punishing her. It became about protecting me. And yet, no matter how quiet I tried to be, the noise found me. It happened on a Thursday morning while I was sipping burnt coffee from the same chipped mug I'd had since college. I was still in my pajamas, hair tied up in some pathetic bun that was more nest than style, and I was halfway through rereading an old email from a parent thanking me for helping their kid pass geometry because yes, sometimes I reread stuff like that just to remind myself I matter to someone. That's when my phone buzzed. At first I thought it was spam, or one of those political texts begging me to stand with someone I've never heard of. But no, it was a group message. My name wasn't in the list of recipients at the top, which should have been my first clue. But I saw the contact photos, Nate, Kayla, and Mom. My stomach clenched before I even opened the thread. The first message was from Carol, my mother, who still hadn't called, still hadn't said a word to me since she brushed off my hospital bills and toasted Nate's house with imported tequila. Carol, Lena's being dramatic again. Honestly, I'm tired of walking on eggshells around her every time something doesn't go her way. She makes everything about herself. It was like someone jammed their fingers straight into my chest. I read it 3 times, just to be sure I was seeing what I was seeing. And then came Kayla, always ready to throw gasoline on anything that even remotely resembled a bridge. Kayla, she's just bitter because you didn't enable her bad decisions. You've done enough. Don't let her guilt you into anything. Nate didn't reply, of course. He never did when it came to me. He liked to pretend he was neutral, but silence has weight, and his was always heavier than mine. I stared at those words, my face hot, my hand trembling so hard, I almost dropped the phone. Then I realized something. This wasn't a mistake. Someone must have added me by accident. Maybe Carol was trying to forward one of my old texts and hit the wrong button. Maybe the group thread had the wrong number saved in it. Whatever it was, I wasn't supposed to see that. But I did. I saw it. And I heard them, clearer than I ever had in person. All these years, I had been the emotional mule, carrying every heavy load, smiling through every slight, swallowing every insult, and calling it love. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who sent cards on anniversaries, who showed up when nobody else did, and somehow, I was still the villain in a story they wrote without me. That was the moment I felt the last thread snap. No warning. No explanation. I blocked them all. Mom. Nate. Kayla. Every number. Every platform. Email. Socials. I even took down the photos in my hallway, family pictures that used to make me smile in passing and now felt like framed betrayals. But cutting someone off is only clean if you don't look back. And I looked. I sat there for an hour after blocking them, heart pounding, and I thought about all the things I never said, all the moments I let slide. And then a different kind of clarity settled in, not the fragile clarity of a victim, but the cold, measured calm of someone who's been underestimated for too long. See, I've always done Mom's taxes. Since Dad passed, I took over because she didn't want to pay a CPA and I knew the forms better than she did. I knew every deduction she tried to claim, including a few that danced on the edge of legality. Charitable donations to a religious organization that turned out to be her friend's Etsy shop. Medical expenses that were actually Botox and laser treatments. A vacation she claimed was for volunteer work, but was really just her and Nancy hitting wine country. So I did what any daughter-turned-accountant-turned-scorned woman would do. I wrote an anonymous letter to the IRS. Simple. Straightforward. Nothing dramatic. Just a nudge toward the numbers. If they looked close enough, they'd find the dirt. If they didn't, fine, I wasn't holding my breath. But it felt good to seal the envelope, to take back a little power with my name nowhere in sight. And I wasn't done. Nate once had a client when he was starting out, a guy named Derek who bought a house through him and ended up suing the builder for faulty work. Nate kept bragging that he talked him down and got the guy to back off with a handshake and a bottle of scotch. What Nate didn't know was that Derek emailed me last year when he found out I was his sister, asking if I knew anything about the property because he felt like he'd been screwed. I never responded until now. I sent Derek a short, polite message. You might want to revisit that inspection. Some things weren't filed correctly. No signature. Just the facts. Then I deleted the thread. 2 weeks passed. And then one afternoon, while I was watering the sad little houseplants in my window, there was a knock on the door. I didn't have to look through the peephole. I knew the shape of her shadow. She stood there for 5 long minutes, knocking, then waiting, then knocking again. I saw her through the curtain, no makeup, eyes red, holding her purse like it might shield her from the cold. I didn't open the door. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because I finally understood the power of silence. And I wasn't ready to give it up. I always thought grief came with noise, wailing, slamming doors, a dropped glass in the sink, but instead, it moved in slow and quiet, like smoke you didn't notice until you were choking on it. After I left her standing on my porch and walked away from the door, I didn't expect her to stay away. I thought maybe the silence would finally say what my words couldn't, that absence might succeed where explanations had always failed. But Carol Foster was never the type to sit still in discomfort. She weaponized sentiment the way some people weaponize guilt, which, in her case, were often the same thing. First came the voicemails, soft at first, like she didn't want to scare me. Hi, sweetie, just checking in, hope you're okay. Then more urgent. I don't know what's going on, but I really need to talk to you. Please call me back. And then came the ones that sat somewhere between apology and accusation. I know I've made mistakes, but we're family, and you don't just cut off your mother like that. I didn't raise you to be cruel. Every time my phone lit up with her number, my chest tightened. Not from fear, from pressure. Like an old bruise being pressed, just enough to remind me it never really healed. Then the Facebook posts started. Not directed at me, not tagged, just hanging in the air like emotional bait. A photo of me from high school graduation, captioned, "My beautiful girl. Miss her every day." A meme about how a daughter may outgrow her mother's lap, but never her heart. Then, the real kicker, a status update where she talked about forgiveness and loss, and how some people just drift away and forget who really loved them. That one lit up the comments like gasoline. Her church friends, old coworkers, distant cousins, everybody chimed in with their 2 cents. She'll come around, Carol. Kids always do. Don't give up on her. God has a plan. Have you tried writing her a letter? Sometimes texting just doesn't reach the heart. Some people even messaged me directly. A couple from my childhood church, one from a former neighbor who hadn't spoken to me in years. Hey Lena, I know it's not my place, but your mom is hurting. Maybe you should reach out. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I was already knee-deep in a process that didn't make room for their sympathy. I was remembering things, small moments that came back sharper than they had any right to be. I remembered being 10 and standing next to Mom at the mall while she bought Nate a Game Boy for Christmas, her voice bright with excitement, telling him not to tell me because she had to be fair. I remembered asking her just a week before if we could go on my class field trip and being told, dead serious, that things were too tight that month. I remembered being 25 and applying for scholarships while working nights at a bar, and how I asked her to co-sign a student loan so I wouldn't drown before I even started. She said she couldn't, her credit was too stretched, her obligations too many. Then I found out later that same year she co-signed Nate's new car. Not even a necessity, some lifted pickup truck he used to impress Kayla, a woman who always wore too much lip gloss, and looked at me like I was something that crawled out of the return bin. I remembered every "I wish I could help," and how it always came dressed like love but felt like dismissal. That phrase wasn't about capability, it was about choice. She could help. She just chose not to. She always chose Nate. And every time she chose him, she taught me something: how to hold my breath, how to stop expecting softness, how to survive when nobody's coming to save you. So I started sending her things. Not messages. Artifacts. The first was a torn-up birthday card from when I was 8, one I had found folded into the back of an old drawer. The front read, "To my favorite girl," but the handwriting was rushed, like she'd forgotten my birthday until the last minute. Inside was blank. No note. No memory. Just a name. Then I mailed her the hospital bracelet from my appendix surgery, wrapped in a paper towel and sealed in a plain envelope. No letter. No explanation. Just the cold truth of it, my name, the date, the barcode of survival. After that, I sent her a photograph, me at 15, standing next to a science fair project I won an award for, one she didn't attend because Nate had a soccer game the same day. I wrote one line on the back, "You missed this," but I didn't. The final thing I sent was a handwritten note, not in anger, not even in pain. Just plain honesty on a torn sheet of lined notebook paper. "You did help. You taught me how to survive alone." I dropped it in the mail without ceremony. No return address. No fanfare. Just the truth she had helped me earn, one painful memory at a time. That night, I got a voicemail that didn't sound like any of the others. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, and she wasn't performing anymore. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't think you'd actually disappear. I thought you'd always come back." And in that moment, as I stood in the dark of my kitchen, phone in hand, I realized something so simple it almost hurt. She wasn't sad that I was gone. She was shocked that I finally meant it. Time passed not in big sweeping changes, but in small, almost imperceptible shifts that only made sense when I stopped long enough to look back and notice how far I'd come without realizing it. It wasn't some movie montage of me waking up at dawn to jog, getting a new job, meeting someone cute at a coffee shop, and laughing in slow motion. It was more like this quiet crawl toward stability, messy, uncertain, and so slow it almost felt like standing still. But then a week would go by and I'd realize I hadn't cried once, or I'd get the mail and find out I was another $100 closer to paying off that last hospital bill. That kind of victory doesn't come with applause, but it comes with peace. I picked up extra hours at the school once my lungs stopped betraying me, took on a night tutoring gig with a couple of burnout high school seniors who hated math but loved snacks, and I budgeted like my life depended on it, because for a while it really did. Every coupon clipped, every meal stretched an extra day, every guilty splurge on a $5 bottle of wine from the corner store. It all counted. And I started counting things differently. Not just money, but time, energy, people. I stopped explaining myself to people who'd already decided what version of me they wanted to believe in. I stopped chasing approval from those who measured love by convenience. And somewhere in that process, I began to feel solid again. Like I had roots. Like I wasn't going to be knocked over by the next gust of guilt someone tried to send my way. Then, about 4 months after I cut them all off, a letter arrived in the mail. Not a typed message or some generic Hallmark card. A real letter. Written in my mother's handwriting, with its familiar slant and too many exclamation points in places they didn't belong. It was 3 pages long, front and back, and I didn't read it all at once. I read the first few lines standing by the mailbox, then folded it back up and stuck it in my coat pocket until the sun went down. She said she missed my voice. Said she had started going to therapy. That she had finally begun to see the patterns, the favoritism, the ways she made me feel small even when she thought she was protecting me. She said she was sorry. That she knew she was wrong. That she wanted to fix things. That family shouldn't fall apart like this. That blood is thicker than, well, you know. I folded the letter neatly and put it in the back of my desk drawer, behind the receipts and the extra keys I don't use anymore. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't answer either. I just let it sit there. Still, unopened past page 1. Maybe because deep down, I didn't want to read an apology that had taken 41 years to show up. Or maybe I just didn't believe it could change anything anymore. Weeks later, Nate posted a video on social media, a cheesy, over-the-top gender reveal with pink smoke bombs and dramatic music, and there she was, Mom, laughing, clapping, hugging Kayla like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't spent the last few months acting like her daughter had dropped off the planet. It was surreal, watching them celebrate like I hadn't been erased. Like I hadn't been left behind. And the worst part? They didn't look sad. They looked like people who'd rewritten the story and left out the parts that made them uncomfortable. A friend of mine texted me that night. She goes to Mom's church. She said, "I saw your mom at service today. She looks awful. Like she's been crying for weeks." I stared at the message for a long time, letting it sink in not because I doubted it, but because I didn't know what I was supposed to feel anymore. Pity? Satisfaction? Guilt? None of it fit quite right. I picked up my phone, hovered my thumb over her contact, and let it linger there like something holy. The silence stretched out, long and familiar, like an old friend sitting next to me and nodding gently. And then I deleted the contact. Just like that. Not out of hate. Not out of rage. But because I finally understood something I hadn't before. Sometimes, you get so tired of being hurt that you stop needing an apology to move on. You stop needing closure from the people who never gave you kindness in the first place. You stop making space for someone who only ever wanted you to be convenient. A few days later, I got a letter from the hospital, the last one. Big, bold letters at the top, final notice, paid in full. I ran my fingers across the paper like it was some ancient treasure, like it held proof of something more than just cleared debt. It meant I'd survived. Not just the infection, not just the surgery, but the shame, the abandonment, the constant uphill climb of being the one nobody checked on until they needed something. I sat by the window that night, watching the last stretch of sunlight drip across the kitchen counter, and I smiled. Not because it was over, but because I did it alone. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most brutal revenge of all.